All right. When you see the skull of truth behind me, where all the crap is
True,
stripped away,
true, or die trying? Is that what you're getting at? Is that
kind
is that the symbol you're
of.
sitting? Get to the truth or die trying?
Yeah. Just carve away all of the social crap. That means I'm usually sitting with a guest and that we're going to talk about some RPG stuff in an RPG conversation. So today I'm joined by Jason Graham, who a few videos ago I shared a game that he participated in creating, A Dark Age of Man. And now he's in the process of taking those men off to space.
Right.
And so we're going to talk about that process, I guess, really,
hmm
and the frustrations that come from it, and the process that goes into finding and hunting down and killing those frustrations.
Right.
So,
Exactly. One
so
one
where I
hundred
am
percent.
now is I saw uh, a play test where you got to be the player and your partner in crime, Dell, was the presenter. And then you both did reflections, and I've seen the reflections from from both of you, and that's as caught up as I am.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you've since run it yourself.
Yes.
Did that did that help in?
Uh, it is a distinct difference for me from GMing and playing is um so I mean for the 35 years I've been involved, most of my time was a GM prior to coming to YouTube in 2010, where I've been fortunately, thanks to friends and colleagues, I've been exposed to the playing side of the table. I've learned a lot. I've played a lot of games. And but one of probably my frustrations, even through the development of Dark Age of Man, as much of it was from how do I change this? I talked about this briefly. How do I change what it's like to GM in this game? Because I was doing a particular thing as a GM I wanted to codify in that book. But I also want for that to occur, for me to be a naive narrator, the goal was to get players to take more agency. And so we attempt to explain that in the book, and we try to invite that at the table. That's Dell and I's thing. And as players, I have wanted to do that to some degree, take a little bit of descriptive or narrative agency over what's happening around my character. Not in 5 years able to fully flesh these ideas out, but certainly could flesh out the GMC stuff, right? That became naive narrator, presenter in our game. Okay, well, there is a distinct difference for me when I'm GMing from when I'm playing. And that's been one of the things I can't quite line up. And for me to further develop and write I think a fully complete rule book for Space Age of Man, I want those two pieces need to come closer together. What is it I'm looking from the player experience for players, but for myself? And the presenter seat, I feel it's pretty much defined. There may be some tightening up we have to do of things there to help really kind of ask the GM player to try these things, do it this way for this reason. But to do that, I need to define better what role we want players to have. And for somebody who has said, I love in character as character play, I must admit I've not fully understood the complete concepts of that. But from my perspective, which we've exchanged definitions, and I fully agree with yours there, didn't process there was such a thing as in character as author. That was the eye-opening definition in your last email. It's like, holy cow. I've played, I think, Powered by the Apocalypse has some of this. I don't know. Part of my problem is I've not played a game that asked me to be author so much, right? At least that I'm aware of. But it hit me that we're kind of asking players in Dark Age of Man, you've got to author some of this because the presenter's naive, but it never crossed my mind we were asking them to be authors. And so
Right.
that was instantly a light bulb went on for me. So our email exchange helped me tremendously just in recognizing that's a thing. That's a thing
Cool.
I've been blind to. And as a player, I've only experienced briefly, except in some Dark Age of Man playtests and sessions. Okay. And then finally, in character as player, is that I think
Yeah.
you've defined that. That seems to be probably my experience in 90% of my game sessions. Is that you really are a character, but you're always kind of a player in character, dealing with both the game itself and the mechanisms, but also trying to engage everything from a player's perspective. I mean, from a character's perspective, that you're not bringing in outside information. And so, if I
Right.
sum that up pretty good, have
You're
I
good.
have I recapped
Yeah,
your definitions fairly?
that's right. So we're, I think, out there on the internet, we're all pretty comfortable with in character and out of character as meaning
Yeah,
something.
yeah. Agreed, 100%. Yeah,
And then out of character, we think of as when we're not actually playing, or when it's definitely Anthony, definitely talking to Jason about something
correct.
that isn't the game, or, and then as we work our way closer to the game, like we're talking about a rule, or we're talking about a ruling, or whatever it is, all these things are out of character. And so
Yeah,
that, I mean, we can clean up that definition and say this is the part of the conversation that can include information that extends beyond everything related to the game, beyond what the character knows, beyond what the play state is, beyond what the rules are,
right.
right?
Yeah.
While we're still sitting around with the intention to play. So we can have
Mhm.
in character play and we can have out of character. We can still play. And then we can have out of
Yeah,
character conversation, and then we just have conversation.
yeah,
But when we're in character, if we're going to make that distinction, there are many of us in the hobby who don't want to feel like they have to perform,
yeah. Well, yeah. I don't want
right?
to interrupt you, but that's one of my problems. I'm not an actor. As when I role play, I'm not an actor. Yeah,
Right. So we can take that as one extreme along a spectrum of in character, like LARP, for example, where
right,
my responsibility as a LARPer would be to have an appropriate costume and help find an appropriate venue and then operate within that space and within that character so that it's easier for you to get
hmm,
immersed in the environment. If we all
right,
help each other,
right,
then this should be a pretty immersive and engaging experience.
right, right.
But most of the time, we're going to be playing around a table using dice, and we
Hmm.
won't have all of that extra material to help us
Right,
immerse. We only have our imagination.
right.
So then, what are you imagining?
Mhm. Mhm.
Becomes the question for me. What are
Yeah,
you imagining? Am I imagining the world through my character's eyes? If that's the case, then any information I get, which is beyond what the character can sense with their five senses and understand with their skills, is in some way a disruption.
yes, yes, yeah,
And eventually, I'll get so much of that information that I'll no longer be in the character's point of view. I'll be somehow removed from it and making decisions about the character rather than as the
right.
character.
Bingo.
So that's
Right.
where that phrase came from, in character. So
Yes.
only the information that they could know
Right.
as the character. How am I using it? I'm using it
Yes.
as they would
Right.
use it.
Right.
Or I'm using it as
Okay.
an author might use it, right? They're imagining the scene fully, they're restricting
Right.
themselves to just that
And
scene, but
yes.
they're thinking about some other things. Well, maybe he has a cousin or a contact that can help in this situation,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah. And so this, I mean, this helps a lot, obviously. And ironically, I've been playing now for a long time, and I've not really had a formal conversation about these concepts. My first experiences was just they were instinctual when I sat down to play
Sure.
in your Hollow Earth game. When I sat down to play in Ivan's Lamentations, I wanted to be a character in the headspace, forget all the rules, forget all this nonsense, and not have anything uh, 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 permeate that would not be only what I'm aware of from what I'm told by you or Ivan in that space. So I can literally process it as the character in character.
As the
So I
character.
just played that way because that's what I wanted. I came to the table going, I'm going to do this, damn it. And if it if it had been perpendicular to what you guys were trying to do, there would have been a problem. But generally, no, it worked
That's
out
how
fine
we
for me to do
that's
that.
how we
Yeah.
tend to roll. Yeah.
And so in character, out of character was not a problem. It's like, oh yeah, we're talking about dice now. We have to communicate. So you're gonna have to do this stuff. So that's never been the problem for me.
Right.
So what I've
But it does
encountered
feel different, right?
yes,
Like
oh
if
yeah, oh no,
we've had an
it's
in-character conversation and then suddenly says, well, now you have to roll. Oh, what am I supposed to
yeah,
roll again? Okay, well, you
yeah,
need
yeah,
these things. And how
exactly.
many successes do I need? Well, you need these.
That's right. That's right.
Eventually, with skill, with familiarity, that part of the conversation goes away, but then it still becomes, okay, we'll roll.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I told
Or
Dell, I
some
mean, the only
signal
thing
like,
we can't avoid in Dark Age of Man is you're gonna still have to say. You gotta cue them somehow. And if you're at a table, you can discuss before we're gonna hold a card up, or I'm just gonna tap the table, something that would
right,
maybe minimize those
minimize.
conversations. But
Yes.
we're online. Matter of fact, I don't even play locally for the last, year and a half or so. I'm playing only online. So it all has to be vocalized. And I'm okay with that. I'm a communicator.
Sure.
I love to talk. So that's a danger for me. I got to bring that in. But the reality in that is, again, I've learned to accept that, and I've learned to say, well, all I need is a cue. So Dell is very good at this as a presenter. He doesn't even say your DB value is 12. He just says roll the dice, and he just makes assumptions. We know what we're going to roll, and we'll tell him the number or whatever. And so Dell actually runs Dark Age of Man very much out of the way. As he
Sure.
talks about, he don't want to know when I'm driving the car, I don't want to look at the engine, right? So, um, and that works for me. Where what I'm encountering, and this is a fallout from the not understanding in character as author, in character as
Yeah.
character, really, when I wrote Dark Age of Man, and wanting to beg players, please take agency. Don't wait for me. Don't wait for the call and respond traditional D&D. Here you're walking and you hear something in the distance and they go, what direction? And they start asking questions. Well, that's traditional, that's normal. And so I've partially confused giving them complete agency and in character as character play, right?
Right.
By saying, let's blur that line and giving you some authorship of what you're seeing and what you're about. And it's created this environment that's been remarkably fun in Dark Age of Man. But as a player side, when I sit on the other side of the table, I find myself frustrated by that because at the same time, there's a side of me that doesn't want to give up that information because I'm not experiencing this as a character then, right? I'm creating something, which
Creating.
really is
Yeah.
that becomes the writer in me, the
Yeah.
screenwriter in me, the guy who wants to frame this beautiful scene and the maison scene of where everything is blocked in the film scene and structured, not as dolls, but as to help convey and communicate to my partners at the
What
table
you're seeing. Yeah.
what I'm seeing and also what it means metaphorically sometimes, right? Because I
Yeah.
do tend
Sure.
to see things cinematic. I GM from a cinematic. I've had to learn to not GM cinematically so much because some of those metaphorical things that I might put in a scene are lost on the players. They become irrelevant or they become confusing for the players. So I've learned a lot as an adult GM and player.
Sure.
But this of late, to stay on track, this experience has frustrated me that I'm realizing, oh, I don't really want to author as a player, to be in character as character. I do not want to author
Right.
anything other than communicate what I'm going to do because of what I've learned, right? Or what I've seen or what's affected me. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, we have to then take into account the mechanism that's going to inform all of us of more information. Make a roll for that. I make a roll, okay. Now there's more information here. I succeeded. What does that mean? And then the GM is going to have to really convey what that means. In Dark Age of Man, we're saying to the player, no, you convey what that means. Wonderful. From my side of the table as a GM, which is why I wrote it, I want players to have that freedom. What I didn't realize is that's going to alienate players, people who don't want that freedom. And now I'm finding out what it feels like. So I have literally created this monster. I'm on one side of the table going, no, 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 I don't want to create that. Wait a minute, but I'm asking people in my own game as a GM, please feel free. So what happens when I'm a GM that that isn't providing you in character as character room? I'm actually asking you to play in character as author, right? But when I'm a player, oh no, I want in character as character play. So this is where over the last 3 or 4 years of Dark Age of Man play and development and then of course I'm also stepping out and playing in other people's games and other game systems, etc. And I have zero expectations in those. I just want to I'm playing with people I like, people I've known for 20 years, people I just and we're playing a D20 or we're playing whatever we're playing just as we do it.
Right.
Without any kind of affect, right? We're not attempting to affect a particular atmosphere at the table or a particular environment at the table. It's online, roll 20, it is what it is, right? So I can only get so immersed when I'm adding. I've said it before, I prefer this in my online role-playing space. Human beings, faces, and we roll the dice and we communicate. But everything is Foundry, everything's roll 20. That's another frustration, but that's for another day. We won't
Yeah.
discuss how that wrecks my immersion. So when I talk
But
about
it's similar.
immersion,
It's some kind of
yes, it
detail
is.
that's
It,
that's
it
distracting.
is.
But yeah. So
It
when you
is
talk about
very much
immersion,
so. And that's part of my problem with it's so and I'm kind of I don't want to get off track here. Did I answer your question? I want to hand this ball back to you. Did I answer the
yes,
question for you?
you did.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's true.
Okay.
There's this dividing line somewhere,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? I like to think of these things as direction for my attention. I call them vectors because that amuses me. But
Yeah.
what am I paying attention to right now? So I'm paying attention to the that in character as character perspective. And
Right.
the longer I can do that, the more intense that attention will be, the easier it is because I'm as the situation, as the environment is having things added to it, or like we're walking down a hallway and I'm learning more things about the environment, right?
Yeah.
There are parts of it that I don't have to maintain. They become constant back. I know who I'm with and I know what they look
Right.
like, and I right. But then this new
Yeah.
thing will come in and that will be added to the mix, and that's a stronger point of attention. And at some point,
Mm.
that continued focused activity leads to that sense of immersion, right? Where I
Yep.
recognize I have no idea how much
100%.
time has passed, or
Right.
I, I don't know what time it is. I
Right.
haven't looked at the phone. I haven't,
Yep.
all I've been doing is thinking about this. So immersion.
Yep. Yep. And I've talked about in the flow
Yeah.
state of getting so focused and so concentrated on something that we are immersed. Not immersion in the LARPing type way where I'm going to go
No.
to all extremes with lighting and with costume and with voices, but immersed in the concentrated state of mind. I'm solely focused. And that's why I've had people say I get immersed in Pathfinder. I say yes, because you're immersed in the actual rules of Pathfinder. You can be immersed in a war game. You don't have to be role
Yes,
playing to be
absolutely.
completely focused on a war game. So immersion can occur even in a tabletop war game for those that are in which the
100%.
challenge, their capacity for the challenge is equal. If it's too easy for you, you will never be immersed. If it's too frustrating for you, you will never be immersed, which
It
is
has to
why
be
I
able to hold
discuss
your
with
attention.
people exactly. Which is why I tell people you need to be fluent. If you really want to enjoy 2D20 Star Trek to its fullest, you must be fluent in the mechanics. You must be playing with people who are fluent in the mechanics, and then we can get to immersion in 2D20 Star Trek, no
Yeah.
problem. But you can't be trying to translate French when you don't know French very well and expect to be immersed in a conversation with a French
Right.
person, right?
That just builds up the effort without.
Yeah, and then the frustration of what's the word I'm looking for. So much for that wonderful, just simple over coffee
Yeah.
conversation with a French person, right? It becomes translation, which for me is not concentration, right? So my French, for instance, I would be frustrated, would never get immersed in that. I wouldn't be fully paying attention to the conversation as I'd be more concerned about translation of the conversation.
Yeah.
So I think this is where my discussion about immersion has maybe been misinterpreted as when I say
Sure.
immersed, I mean like acting, LARPing. No, I'm in complete agreement with you with the immersion conversation there. Yes. So in character as character play, how much of this new information is continuing to to play? I see it like a box. And it's funny, Adele did this in a Simba Room session. The box started wide as he described the broader thing we were dealing, right? Because it was a broad introduction to the environment. And then Dale got narrower and narrower and narrower as he described this
More detail.
2 hour, and I was so immersed, I could not escape we were inside the guts of a giant worm basically. And as Dale would narrate more and more, I got more and more creeped out, more and more. My character was terrified. My character wanted nothing but to get out of this situation. And
Yep.
I was motivated solely for my character to escape this. I felt the confinement. I felt the what is the word I'm looking for? He had done such a superb job, whether he meant to or not, he did, right? Even if it was by accident, I was in character as character, and he created a claustrophobic environment in which I had to get away
Had to
from.
get
And it
out.
was remarkable experience. But again, we're not always consistent enough to create these experiences time and time again, right? This is also
No.
part of gaming. It's very difficult to have that, let's say, for a campaign or for multiple sessions or even for an entire session. It's very difficult to do. But that was an experience where I said, okay, why did that, playing Simbaroom, which is not Dark Age of Man, it's not this thing I thought was in character as character agency. I had very little agency over what I'm looking at, where I can run to, is there a door, is there an exit, right? Whatever. Um, that process is rare for me, right? And that's what I'd ideally like to be in, that state of mind
Sure.
when I'm a player most of the time, if you can do it, right? As a GM, this has been the conflict. I've written a game that's basically telling people you don't have to be in that state of mind. You can create your own, your own authorship to some degree.
Well,
So it's been a very interesting 4 years as the writing and
that's
the
it.
developing, but then the discovery that wait a minute, when I sit at my own table as a player in Dark Age of Man, I'm often conflicted, right? And
Well, let's
but
let's talk about that.
immersion, I mean,
Let's back up. Let's back up
yeah,
just a little bit.
yeah,
All right. So the situation you described with Dell, I think, is a fantastic example of a really strong moment of immersion. Multiple senses, feelings are activated as a result of your interest in your focus on what this
hmm
is. So your imagination is occupied,
yeah,
your attention is held there in a
yeah,
very immersive experience.
yeah,
For my own purposes, I found it necessary to break immersion up. And then I realized what I was really talking about was attention.
yes,
So
yes,
the way that usually the internet talks about immersion, I feel they're talking about attention, right? So
okay,
I was a
yeah,
little immersed. I was kind of paying attention a little bit.
right,
I was really immersed. I was right. I was ignoring other things in order to pay
yes,
attention to that thing.
yeah,
So that's what
exactly,
I think of as immersion. So
yeah,
under that heading of attention, then we have immersion, which is receiving the description, receiving the information. So just like diving into the water, right? You're
yep,
not creating the water. You've allowed yourself to enter into it, and then you experience all of those feelings, the temperature,
yes,
the
yeah,
sensations. But like you said, playing a war game, I can get just as lost.
oh yeah,
And that's not anything like what you just described.
oh
So
no,
that I hung the description of engagement on, which people also
yeah,
say, well,
right,
immersion's a bad word, let's use engagement. So I
yeah,
just took those two words. So
that's exactly right,
immersion, passive, reacting to the play, right?
yep,
And then engagement, well, I'm rolling the dice, but in my mind, that's my attack, right? I'm
right,
lining up the Desert Eagle on the
yeah,
target.
exactly,
And then
yeah,
it rolls and it stops rolling, and I see that I got the number I need. So I feel the kick in my hand. I'm engaged.
yeah,
I'm there.
yeah,
And it could be that the game master says, "What'd you get?" And I'll go, 37 or whatever it is,
right, exactly,
right?
exactly, yeah,
And I can hang on to that feeling, even though we're talking now out of character about the numbers.
right,
But
yes,
maybe I can't. Maybe I'm
right,
tired. Maybe I don't know the
sure,
game well enough. Blah blah blah. But as soon as we start talking about the numbers, then I lose my grip on the imagination part of all of that. And now it's
yes.
just you and me talking about the dice. And I go,
Yeah.
mm,
And this has been something that I learned as a kid playing tabletop sports games. I have to process the data I'm getting to understand how that translates to what I'm seeing on the field. And the more expert I was at the dice and knowing the result quicker, the more I was staying in the space of seeing what was transpiring in the sport.
right.
And when a friend would say, "Oh, 48 interception," I'm like, "No, I don't want to hear 48. Damn it. Describe the interception to me."
Describe the
My
interception.
friends are like, "Dude, we're playing a sports game." I'm like, "No, no, Dan Marino drops back and flings it out there, right?" And whatever. It's so I do this all the time in my solo
Yes.
stuff, all the time. I ignore the dice unless there is that moment where you roll the thing you just know is a touchdown and you can't help but go, "Oh my God, 66 is whatever." So we all do it. I mean, we are grown human beings that become children and we have those moments of the
Yes.
childlike
Of
joy of
wonder.
dropping
Yeah.
dice and win or gamblers, or maybe we're all gamblers at heart and we know when we've rolled that perfect roll, right? So, but yes, I'm 100% in agreement. It is about attention, engagement, and concentration. And what am I concentrated on? And when a GM provides a space that furthers that concentration through my six senses, my five senses, whatever we're using, and we're not getting wasted information, right? I've talked about this all the
Right.
time. I want to be Hemingway when I GM. I want to give
Sure.
you enough to inspire your imagination, but I have to give you enough that you're not going, "Where's the door in this room?" Because now we
Exactly. You
got a
have to give the
problem, right?
essentials. Yeah.
You have to
Yeah.
get it or I've blown it. I've messed it up. If you're having to ask questions that aren't from your character's need to know, right? I mean, your character
Yeah.
will have questions because we're exploring a mystery.
Yeah. Yeah.
Always a mystery. But they shouldn't have to say, "Are the lights on in here?" "Oh, holy cow. Yeah, it's dark."
So actually,
Oops,
you didn't see any
sorry.
of that. So just forget
Yeah,
about all that
yeah,
stuff.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. Right. Yeah, you like to hope. Now, see, here's the next thing for me. So
Space.
yeah, and the in character as character experience that I had in that particular session with Dell, I also was from Talon, my character's point of view. I had a character I'd been playing. We were sharing the GM seat, so I would GM some, play in two other sessions, play in other people's sessions of Simba with my character. But I had developed a character. I had been playing this from this character's point of view. I knew who this character was. I would step into the shoes of this character. This character had been basically a bit of a alcoholic and drug dealer when he wasn't out in the world facing the he had been missing. So I would describe when my character was missing from sessions as vanished from the group and went off on a drinking binge or a whoring binge. So those were things I had authored as explanation for why my character was not here tonight, is because I'm GMing. Well, I
Sure.
took that to heart as I authored this as explanation for our campaign. So it meant something to me, and that I carried that into Talon's, makeup. So this developed over a course of so many sessions. And then, of course, to be in that situation that Dell had put us in, but also from his perspective, was truly haunting, truly terrifying for this, not for me, Jason Graham. It's
Right.
right. I was that in character. And see, this is also, are we feeling this because I'm uncomfortable as a player, which is where I think a lot of people have confusion with this culture of inviting new people to role playing. They're confusing the table and the player and the verbiage with being literal when no, we're talking about characters in a space. So yes, we are going to say things like rape when you don't want to hear rape as a human being at the table. Sorry, but this is happening I'm not gonna talk about rape, but I mean rape, the word might come up that might offend a person. But so also, are we in this space as the character through this process? And that is my goal, right? I was
Right.
Jurgen in Ivan's game, and Jurgen was so distraught with his god not affecting his life that he threw out his right, which again was one of the most remarkable experiences for me as a human being in that game. It's like,
Right.
my God, I came to that as Jurgen, not as me going, "I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to make this interesting and manipulate the game." No, no, no. It was Jurgen literally laying in the mud, sitting on his knees in the mud, uh, took off his cross and said, I had it. This damn God is worthless." You know what I mean? I
Right.
had a moment. I had to ask Ivan later, out of game, "Are you okay with me abandoning my cleric class to become a fighter?" And he's like, "Sure, if you want to," because I didn't want to step on toes. But at the same time, Jurgen had had this experience. He could not. At what point am I going to be a cleric if I'm not going to turn undead and I'm not going to heal? Because he doesn't believe in his god anymore. So I can still be a
Right.
cleric that's castrated, fine, right? That would have been class. All my class skills would have been cut off from me. So I said, "Are you okay if he just becomes a first level fighter?" Sure, that'll work, right? Because that's what I was at that point. So these were moments that were so moving to me as character, that it affected a state of mind, but it affected play even in Lamentations with Ivan, right? So
And we can
these
use
are
those moments. We can use those moments to help clear up any confusion about as character, as
right,
author, and as player. So in that last description, a player of a game, especially one that gives them some kind of currency to spend or mechanic to change the scene, might
right,
say this is an ideal time, right, for
yeah,
my character to have a crisis of faith. So I'm going to use this crisis
right,
of faith move, right?
right,
This is a perfect
yep,
time in our story for me to
yep,
activate this move, which will have this effect on the character, right?
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
then that might be fully out of character, like we all nod our heads, wow, this would be the perfect time. Oh,
yeah,
imagine
right,
how cool that is, right?
right, yeah,
Or this can be what you described as character, like the character loses their faith,
yeah,
and
it
you, the
was,
player, recognize they lost their faith. And then
yes,
you have a shock of empathy or sympathy or
right,
something along
right,
those lines,
right,
which some people talk about as bleed, right?
sure,
The transference
sure.
from one to the other.
Right, right. Yeah,
That middle
I
state,
experienced it. I actually
you
experienced
experienced it.
Jurgen
Yeah.
losing faith versus, hey, this is and again, I'm going to use some words here that might be inflammatory, but it's the best vocabulary I have. Games that have those machinations, those mechanics, I feel are contrivance, and that's one reason I avoid games with those kind of things. However, if I'm playing a game that I know those are part of it, I'm more than willing to play the game as it's written for those reasons.
Sure.
But those also
But you
affect
don't
my
need them.
in character. How can I have an in
Yeah.
character as character? So your fantastic play with the Bryans and Ivan in your Call of Cthulhu,
Oh, yeah.
right? I know sanity is a mechanic, so those are things that in character as character. I want
It's
to
problematic.
experience being driven
Yeah.
insane. I don't want to make a roll to be driven insane.
Yeah.
So, can you inspire my character to actually question his? Can you, as a GM, inspire me to question my own sanity as a character? And that's unfair to ask of most GMs that you're somehow responsible for creating such an remarkable space. Let's face it, not everybody. That's why we need rules, because I'm not strong enough to lift the gate. So my fighter has 18 strength. He is strong enough to lift the gate, right? It's the same concept. We need that sanity to somehow impact us and to somehow affect play. But I
Even
would
if my
like to
words weren't
think
strong enough, this roll tells you that whatever it is that you're imagining, just
that's
make
it.
it worse, and
That's
let's
it.
roll. Yeah.
And because most people aren't going to probably come to the table in character as character space where they're going to be easily transformed by your description.
Right.
And I was telling Dell in one of our conversations, it may or may not have been in one of our podcasts. It may have been an actual one that we didn't record. We try to record all of our conversations we can, but um, because I like these kind of candid conversations. I don't care about being right. I only care about becoming more aware and learning and being, I have zero interest in being right in any
The
of this stuff.
truth.
Yeah, right. I only care about progressing. I just want to evolve, right? I mean,
Yeah.
okay. So I forgot what I was saying, but I got so caught up in my wanting to be.
So there. Well, that's the point, right?
Yeah.
The in character, the in character play allows us to get caught up. The in character
Right.
play allows us to be surprised by things that
Right.
bubble up from somewhere. Like for
Yep.
some people that I've played with, it's their understanding of who the character is becomes an automatic process. For other people, it's accessing their artistic, creative sense, and they don't know where
Mhm.
this idea came from, but they get to enjoy it
Right.
as it happens. Whatever,
Yeah.
focused attention on this small subset of information.
Right.
And then as the player, we're interacting with the people who are there, we're interacting with the ideas that are thrown out, we're activating the character layer, the story layer, the system layer, right?
Right.
And we're willing to shift between all of those,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas as character, we're trying to prevent the need to shift out, right?
Right.
Somewhere in the middle is that author perspective, where
Yep.
maybe I'm thinking of the character like a third person position in a video game, where I want to
Mm-hmm.
be able to see them
Yeah.
in my imagination rather than see out of them into the imagined space.
Right.
And I don't really want to play with their story, but I might want to be able to realize that in order for this character to do what this character does, they have to have a contact, or they have to have an ally, or they have to have a certain resource. And I wasn't able to think of this before we started playing, but now it's obvious that they have to have had that in order to be this person.
Correct. 100%. Right. Yeah.
And
Which is
so,
Dark Age of Man, right?
yeah, it is.
I am literally saying as player that I have to position myself in the space. I'm asking you to. You are a lord, you're an alderman. Well, that's everything that implies. That means you're going to have land, you're going to have a keep, you're going to have an army, you're going to have servants, you're going to have this. And when you address the lord in the war council or in the council, you are there's gravitas there as a prestige. So you should be aware of it as a player, and you should be looking at your character as a tool toward affecting play. And the GM, being naive, should be responding in kind as the motivated lord, or what the wants or the needs or desires of, and all the players put their pieces in.
It's their chance to play.
It's their chance to be, in a way, viewing your alderman as a tool as well, right? So this is where I didn't recognize that, but in Dark Age of Man, in Sam's sessions, for instance, as an alderman, right? I was fully aware of what I was trying to position, but I was trying to do it from describing my character in that headspace. And I realized probably for me to have been more effective would have been to flat say, I'm going to use my prestige here to impact, to bend the Lord's ear to my plans. That
So
I would
then
have
move it
felt
out to
I
as
would have
player.
felt less
Yeah.
frustrated as a player trying to change the space than I was in my alderman trying to do it through dialogue,
Or
hoping to
sharing your
cue
thoughts.
the GM, hoping to
Yeah.
cue the naive GM of what I'm trying to do to this whole
Right.
scenario. And I realized I've created this environment where I can't be both. I either have to say I'm using prestige to, right, or I have to be in a space where my dialogue would express that. And that has nothing to
Or
do with Sam's communication. It
yeah.
had to do literally with the environment that I found myself in as an
Right.
alderman in that scene,
And
right?
you had no one to talk to. You had no one to take
Well, and
aside to.
I had no way to say I literally am using my prestige here to bend the Lord's ear my direction, as I
Yeah.
am the highest prestige player here, right? And if he misses that, or if he's so into the Lord's NPC head that he's made up his mind about something already, which is not naive, right? You
Right.
can't.
It's
You
not.
need to be naive for me to maybe bend the space to change the direction of the game.
Yeah.
So,
So
these are
this is the
things
key
that as a
point.
developer, go ahead.
This is
Go
the key
ahead.
point that you're bashing into with Space Age of Man. Really,
Yeah.
is the control of information, or the flow of information. So as that alderman, if you could have shared your thoughts,
Mhm.
right? Well, let's see. I'm more prestigious than anyone here. So
Mhm.
what I could do is, but that's not going to work for everybody, because
Nope.
that might go too far toward performance for some, or
Correct.
it just might hit the, well,
Or writer
unless
room.
ever,
It comes off as the writer room kind of style of gaming, right?
right.
Yeah.
So it creates problems along the lines. And then what you were hitting in with Space Age of Man was that, well, I don't have enough information to imagine this environment, and
Right.
I'm not sure what my character should know.
Correct. Yeah. Not only
Yes.
in the immediacy of the moment, but in the grand scope of what science fiction genre limitations are we viewing here, right?
Right.
Which, that comes from hopefully us setting a setting when we write the book. I mean, I told Dell, it's not even mechanics that I'm concerned about in Dark Age of Man. I mean, in Space Age of Man, I'm now concerned maybe we just write a campaign setting. This should be more of a setting book, and let people choose whatever mechanics they might well want to use for it. But Dell, of course, and I think we're in agreement. We want the package to be a total
Sure.
concept, like Dark Age of Man. What I don't want, and again, I think Dark Age of Man for what we did and we achieved, fine. But that's not the best we would like it to be. And I don't care if you're designing a game to be shared narrative. I don't care if you're designing a game to create in character space. I don't care what it is you want to design. But know what you're designing and why you're designing it. That's the goal. And so if I'm going to say something about Dark Age of Man, I don't want to later find out my own experience in Dark Age of Man isn't quite what I thought I was doing as for players. As a GM, I'm completely naive. I'm loving it. As a GM, it's like, hallelujah, I've achieved it. I don't know if the book still expresses it as well for other GMs. But again, we have to leave some room for people to be a GM and play the way they want to play. But I also thought I was creating a certain mindset for the players that, well, I was encountering was not occurring. So it's been a wonderful experience, but it's reminded me, oh, I believe in intent. You and I are both, I think, in complete agreement. We believe rules matter. We believe game mechanics matter. We believe these things should be experienced as written, I think. I think we should, before you start tweaking it and changing it and making it D&D, why don't you play it as Traveler, play it as 2D20.
Yeah.
Don't make it Dungeons and Dragons with 2D20, right? So I think we're in agreement that these mechanics matter, and they matter how you facilitate the game. And I was telling Dell in one of our conversations, my other hang up is how a GM facilitates this stuff also impacts whether I'm in character as character, right? And
Sure.
these are things that we just take for granted generally, I think, unless you're trying to achieve that headspace and you're at a table where everybody wants to achieve that headspace. But again, that's another animal in itself when you have 5 players and a GM that all want to engage a certain headspace
Yeah.
when you
And going
play.
from this game is new, we're going to have periods of varied understanding and
Yeah.
resistance and then acceptance and then boredom and then whatever.
Right.
And then finally, at some point down the road, we start actually playing the game and we go, oh,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, and it is a wonderful, which is probably why people choose to play the same game over because there's a comfort level. They can find, they can, it's like the roulette wheel. They're eventually going to come to a spot in the game where it's just a spot they're going to land, and that's a spot they're comfortable in landing in. Um, what if eventually that roulette wheel has only 3 numbers on it. You're bound to hit one of the 3 because you're playing with the same group for 20 years. So it's
yeah,
still a roulette wheel when we drop the dice, we get going, but eventually you're all going to fall into that one of those numbers. As opposed to the first time you come to a table in Dungeons and Dragons with a group of people you've never played with before, that's roulette wheel's got 60 numbers. It's going to be a bouncing ball that's all over the damn place, and eventually you're going to settle in, but session's over, time to go home. Damn.
exactly.
Damn, I was
I don't know
just
what
getting
happened.
into it. Right.
Exactly.
And then there's these experiences, and Ivan and I shared this. This is the first time ever that I had experienced this with another GM. I was playing with Ivan. I was either running a session or he was running a session. And we had this calamitous event, which this is part of what I love about role playing, but especially old D20. Things are very often pass fail calam. They always end up calamitous. You rarely are in charge of anything, right? And there was a moment, I think it was Ivan, I think he was GMing it, and he said, "Wait, let's just stop here for a second, reflect back. What the hell just happened?" And I thought I was the only guy on the planet that did that. I thought I was the only guy on the planet that said, "This has been so crazy. We need to pause and go, what the hell?" Looking at not only the fiction of what's happened, but the dice
Yeah.
and how the things had to happen. And I remember at the time thinking, yeah, Ivan and I, share a particular,
You
I
had your
think
Highlander
entertainment
moment.
about this. Well,
McLeod, we are
I think
brothers.
yeah, and we share a particular kind of what entertains us about this
Yeah.
hobby. And though they are sometimes reflecting on the game itself. Holy cow, this is crazy. Which is why I do recaps, because I always want to share perspective, but I always want to reflect back on what really did we do, what did we see, how did it work, and because I don't care, 35 years of this, and it's still a joy, and it still surprises me, and that's a good thing.
And
That's a
memories
good
are
thing.
fragile.
Oh God, yeah,
So having these recaps of things that happened
yeah,
and what we thought about in the moment, or at least close to the moment,
right.
is really
Yeah.
valuable.
Well, and it's
So,
been f fun. I would recap early in my YouTube days. I would recap the local sessions, and I'd recap even some of my sessions online. And to get the players that after they watch it would say, "Well, you forgot this," or "Hey, this is what actually happened." Like, oh, right. I mean, even the memory is so fragile that even in 12 hours, I would misremember something. And so it
yeah.
is, or my take would surprise people that that was the take I had on the situation. That I was completely misinterpreted what the player's motives were or what the character's motives were because that's how I took all that information in, and I would attribute something to the character or the player that was not what they were thinking, right? And that's again a reminder that we all view the world from our own movie, right? Years ago, I read a book that talked about why do you fight? Why do you argue with people, and why is it it's pointless? Because you're seeing everything from your movie, they're seeing everything from their movie. And until you are in the same movie, wow, are you going to probably find a lot of perpendicular crossroads in these arguments, these conversations.
Yeah.
We just can't help but not view the world from our movie. And we try, I think, as human beings. I try anyway as an empathetic human being to try to understand where other people are coming from. And but how does this carry over to role play? Well, that's the other trick. You say to me, we're going to play Hollow Earth Expedition. Jason, make a character, or hey, here's a pre-made. This is what the character is built on. This is what the character is made of. I'm going to take these attributes and try to make some sense of them that aren't numbers on a page. I'm also going to look at the other attributes and the name of the character, maybe the quick write-up of the character. And I want to honor this character's position as a human being in this experience we're about to have. So I'm not only, that's where the acting side of me comes in. I don't want to play act this guy, but I'm told I'm reading a Tennessee Williams play. I read the lines of those and I'm saying, well, that's who I'm playing. I've got to do the best I can to understand and embody this character as Tennessee Williams wants me to, right? So when you hand me a pre-gen and say Hollow Earth, I'm saying, okay, I want to experience this human being that I'm not, but I also want to make sure this human being fits into the kind of the fictional world we're going to play in here, right? That's part of the genre experience, right? If I say to you we're going to do a Wild West and we got the gambler and we got the rancher, we got the bronc buster and we got the Civil War survivor, whatever, and somebody comes to the table and says and chooses something completely out of genre, we go, no, that's not going to support all of us. It's not going to support everything we're doing here. And so, well, I'm going to be the car mechanic. Stop. Car mechanic. You better put that in context. Well, what time are we playing? Oh, 1886. Oh, yeah, right. Ford did not invent the Model T till 1910, whatever it was. So we said, okay, let's ratchet that back. You work on wagons? You're a cartwright? You're what? So anyway, these are also parts of it for me. If I roll up and create the character, what manifests from it? I've been reading, I think I talked about this in a video. I've been rereading 1982 Copyright Traveler, and it's fascinating. It's just to go back in the 80s and read what their take was. To read one of my favorite lines in all role-playing books. Role-playing is a conversation between people, and I love that because that's where we start. It is a conversation first. But then later it says, by the way, I'm reading this, I'm thinking it's wonderful to read because the D&D books I had did not put things, did not, they took for granted much of this. And Traveler doesn't take anything for granted. It's just a better written book, period. But it gets to the GM and the players is a contest between the GM and the players. And I went, oh, that's something I would not have said in my book. It's a contest between the players and the GM because that instantly creates an antagonistic, yeah. And so I'm like, ooh, that's something I don't like about 1982 Traveler, right? And reading that. And yet, at this late stage, reading 82 Traveler, the description in the beginning of the book, I come away learning something even now.
Yeah.
Right. These are things that I've forgotten. These are things that I never really paid attention to. It's always good to go back and refresh the foundations of our hobby, right? We can get so habitual in what we're doing that we completely, I guess it would be like a chef who is a world-class chef but ends up just doing sushi. At some point he's going to be reminded, oh right, I'm now back at a restaurant that has a larger menu. I better bone up on my skills again here, right? Because
No,
I've been
there can
doing
be only
just
one.
sushi, right? So it's been fascinating, and I spent so much energy on Dark Age of Man in the design, the writing, the play testing that I did nothing else. I played in some stuff, but I did nothing else, and I've kind of come out of this. over the last year. And so, as we took a long break, and I worked on sports games that I've been writing and designing and finishing, to come back to it and say, wait a second, but this time I need Space Age of Man's intention to be true for both sides of the table, and I need to know how we're going to do that. And so it's not something we're going to take for granted, right? It
Sure.
needs to be the full breadth of these concepts or ideas. And even if it's not innovative, I want to make sure people understand what we're trying to get. We want the players to have a particular type of experience. We do a disservice to the customer. We got to remember they're customers. They're purchasing something. And they expect. I've seen a trailer that says this is a horror movie, and I'm expecting a horror movie, and I come in and I sit down, and it's not a horror movie. Whoa, I've been lied to. And so you want that intent to be obvious and executed, even if it's not innovative, right? You want them to at least know what we're trying to achieve here, so they don't waste their time, right? It's to identify it as science fiction. Well, they at least have some idea. To identify it as a strict science fiction, that helps. But then also to identify what we want the player to experience to be and the GM experience to be, and be aware of what we're doing, not so much, oops, I could have done better there, right? If that makes sense. And probably wouldn't be so, probably wouldn't be as hung up on this had I not been so frustrated as a player in the last year and a half or so, 2 years. And now I think more why, because much of what I want, I don't always get in the games I'm in, but much of what I've expected from Dark Age of Man has been counter to the experience I thought I had created for players,
Yeah, that's
right?
interesting. But you may,
Yeah.
like, if we rewind 5 years
Yeah.
and were able to send you the finished copy back 5 years ago and you played it,
Right.
you may have had to have played it for the 5 years to build up the capacity to see the thing that you're seeing in it now.
100%. Yeah. 100%. Um, yeah, I mean, in a way, that's what I've been doing for 5 years, studying this thing, but I was so preoccupied with getting it right for the naive narrator, for the GM's
Sure, that
position.
was the big,
That
that
was
was
that
the
was for
innovation
that was
for
for
you
me.
guys.
Yeah, for me
Yeah,
personally. I can't say for other people out there say, "Oh, do it. I do this all the time." But yeah, again, for me it was an innovation. For me it was a desire. And I also believe that for this to work, because for me to be the naive narrator, the player must take authorship. And
right.
that was the term I didn't have. I didn't even comprehend there could be in character as author. I didn't want writer room. I remember telling Dale that I don't mean
Right.
writer room. I don't mean writer room. I was very quick to say what I don't want it to be, right?
But it's true,
But
but you
not
didn't. You didn't want
recognizing,
the
well,
out
what
of
level is
character.
that?
You didn't
Yeah,
want the out of character discussion of what can we do? What should I do? Wouldn't
right,
it be cool if? That's
right,
off the table. We
exactly,
have to do
exactly.
our best to keep it in the in character sphere. This is
Hmm.
important for defining, carving out that
Yeah,
experience that you want to provide for the
yeah.
person who's taking on the challenge of running the game
Hmm.
and playing
And
the game.
this just your email response when you identified in character as character and you identified in character as author, and I immediately went ding. You need to write you need to write a vocabulary book, my friend, because it would be, I'm telling you, listen, we have a glossary of terms in role-playing books. Why not a book that's a glossary of terms for the hobby of role-playing? And yes, they would be your definitions, but either way, I would have been able to go to Anthony's book of terms in the role-playing hobby and looked up, wait a second, in character as author. That's it. That's what we want. That's what we need for the naive narrator to work,
Yeah. I
right?
think it would
Because
wind
I'm
up getting
creating a
rebranded
naive
as the
narrator
Devil's
seat.
Dictionary.
But well, we need it. And years ago, we talked about we should come up with a dictionary. Not me and you, but I think that
It
you and some
was
people
you
in the
and me and
community.
Brian and yeah, a bunch of
Yeah.
us. We talked about it.
And I'm telling you, I mean, I've seen so many old school samplers, right? These guys write how to be an old school D&D player, right? Well, why can't we have a hobby sampler, right? But ironically, as a designer, it would have helped me to do the naive narrator book because I would have said, for this to work, players must take authorship of some of the information.
Some of it.
And I would love to know. I think Brian and had a good time in our Dark Age of campaigns. I mean, I know he did. Yeah, Brian enjoys gaming, but I wonder how much Brian felt that he was in a way in conflict with. And Brian may have also just been really good at not authoring, right? It all worked, and Brian didn't do a lot of, but Brian, I don't remember him doing a whole lot of authorship, but it worked. And I remember thinking, this is proving how it works. But I wasn't having that experience on my side of the table.
Okay.
So, and this is the thing. That's why I always say,
But
listen,
this is
you
an
may be,
important detail.
yes, it's huge. It's major. And this is why I
Because
tell people, you must
go
play.
ahead.
You can't just GM. You got to also play.
Right.
You have to play.
You have to play.
Yeah.
So here's something I want to propose to you, not to demotivate you from your quest, because I want to motivate you on your quest,
Sure.
but to take the sting out of something that you might be seeing as a shortcoming or a flaw.
Mm-hmm.
That what you and I might feel when asked to insert a little bit of creation into a moment bothers us because of who we are.
Yes.
And the more we do it, the less it'll bother us, just like hot water,
Sure.
putting your hands in hot
It
water.
becomes
Or whatever.
habitual. Right.
Yeah.
And then
But we
turn
might
it
not
off.
want
Oh my God.
to develop that. We don't. We might want
Exactly.
to
And this has
condition
been one
that
of my
limb.
problems with D&D, not going too far, right? It's like, oh, right, I can ask questions, but I can't make that assumption, right? All right, go ahead. I didn't mean to
But
interrupt you.
a player like Brian, with his background, his experiences, and his training, something that we've talked about is that he's more engaged when he is able to be shifting back and forth between the pure imagination of the information he's receiving and his capacity to yes and it, right?
Yeah,
and
that's
send
me.
something back my way,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
That's the position where he really feels that satisfaction of play, rather than
Right.
me, where I'm hoping we can go for a long time where nobody actually says any game speak. I might be
Right.
rolling dice all night long, but I'm
Mhm.
not saying, okay, I'm going to roll my d10 and I got a
Right.
9, and so then
Yeah.
I can.
Yeah.
I just, in my mind, that rolling of the die is the picking of the lock, and
Yeah.
right, and there's
Yeah.
no interruption. That's
Yep.
where my heart lives, right, and
Yeah.
maybe
And
you too.
that was part of why we designed Dark Age of Man to be a single roll, so we can move past that as
As quickly
invisibly
as
as
possible.
possible.
Yeah.
However, as I told Dell, but the game doesn't have to be simple to achieve that, but we must all be fluent in what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're doing it, right? Yeah.
Right.
But I'm in agreement. So I like yes and yes, but because I've been doing more of this concept of giving the players agency. So as I told Dell, you can't know me. You've got a yes and yes, but. And that was one of the frustrations in our play test is there was a couple of moments where he rewinded what I said. I said, you literally just broke our first rule of Dark Age of Man. The players take some authorship. However, we weren't using those terms, authorship, and that's helped us. That's helped both Dell and I go, wait a minute, maybe we don't want to ask players to author anything. But then how do we communicate without stepping on
Right.
those toes? Well,
Yeah.
then we have to recognize we really want to create an in-character, as-character game space, so the GM might not be able to be a naive narrator in that same space. And that's the bell that goes. That was the light that went on, I think, for Dell. That we need to
Cool.
really define some of this space, and we may have to get nitty gritty. And that means the GM's going to have to be the omniscient,
Maybe.
vision of what's right. But I don't know yet. I haven't yet experienced as a naive narrator whether I can put you in the in-character as character space as well.
Sure. So
Right.
in the Call of Cthulhu campaign that you mentioned, one of the things that I'm doing that might be different from how the game might traditionally be run is we might think like, okay, they're going to investigate a haunted house, and so I've got a module, or I've got my own work, and there's a map of the haunted house, and I've got my notes about the haunted house, and so I tell you what you see because it's on the map or whatever.
Yep.
And it's on you for what you imagine.
Yep.
Or we're being very open with the details, and so we're all trying to imagine the same thing.
Right.
These are two pretty common situations.
Yes.
What I'm trying to do in the Turn of a New Leaf campaign is I'm trying to serve as your senses.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
I'm less interested in the objective truth of that room than I am in helping suggest
Yes. Yeah.
something for you to imagine knowing about the character, right? So
Right.
as the characters develop more and more traumas, right? So Ivan's character is getting wrapped up in this paranoia, and everywhere he goes, he's running into resistance. People are out to get him. People are following him.
Right.
Is any of that actually happening? Who
Right. Well,
knows? But it's real
that's
for him.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yes. Well, and that's the joy of experience the game as character. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so when we are approaching it from the idea of naivety, right? I'm going to allow myself to improvise. I'm going to allow myself to be true to the moment. I'm not going to plan out. I'm not going to
Bingo.
put you
And there's
in a
no
cooked situation.
resolution to this. I don't have the resolution. They can move through this space and maybe not even resolve it, but they learn something,
Right.
right?
So from that point of view, I could be describing the town of Dredgewater, or I could be, Moonbase Alpha, or what
Right.
have you, as I imagined it, or I could be loading my mind up with the sights and sounds and smells of sci-fi,
Right.
and then okay, so I roll on the table and I see that we're in the command center and there's a resource issue. Okay, so what are the resource issues in it? Well, okay, air, water,
Right.
right? So
Power.
right,
Right.
so I just begin to
Yeah.
right what matters to my engineer character.
Yeah.
The sensors are telling you can't get any power.
Yeah.
Captain, I can't get no power.
Exactly. No, exactly. 100%. And this is why I talked about years ago when I came on. I said, my goal as a GM is hot potato. Get it? Hemingway-esque, get all the relevant stuff to them and then let them have that descriptive narrative. But again, they couldn't make certain assumptions, right, about what was there, right? They were free to imagine it, and I'd hope that maybe I would elicit something. But I also would like to trust people because I'll be honest, some people just aren't visual. They don't really, right? I mean, there's actually, I can't remember the term for it now. There's some people who don't see in images, right? That can be an interesting challenge because it's all words for them, right? So then they're taking what I say literally, right? And then there's those people who really need you to give them the details. I was telling Dell recently in a conversation, Hemingway, I'm a huge fan of Hemingway because he does leave those open spaces for me to interpret and to imagine. My wife was reading Wallace Stegner years ago, and she said, "You really should try Wallace Stegner." And I picked it up and I read the first page, and the first like 4 pages were him just describing every detail of the petal of a flower. And I put the book down and said, "No, this guy's doing all the heavy lifting. I have zero interest in this." So there's a fine line for me as a player too when I get too much data, too much information, right? But also recognizing as a GM, are we giving enough of that information, or am I giving too much of that information? There's easy identifiers for things you either do or you don't like exposition dumps. I prefer to show don't tell. I don't want exposition. You know what I mean? I don't want that character to walk into scene and dump exposition of everything that's right. So there's things as a GM I just won't do because I don't like it, and I just think it takes some of the fun out of discovery, right? So these things are that
These
you're
are the
talking about
things
are
to
all
talk
true.
about in the game.
Yes, and there it is, the six senses. If you can provide the relevant data so their character can process everything properly. But again, they're going to hopefully process it through both their character, but also you can filter that by knowing that there are things that play into his character's paranoia to some degree. Now, is that intentional or is that accidental? I don't know. In Dark Age of Man, as a naive narrator, nothing I do is intentional. I'm naive. All I'm doing is making sure I put it in front of you in a proper context. How Ivan, as a paranoid person, perceives the guard walking down the street, well, that's on Ivan. his character's delusional. He thinks the guard passing by's got an eye on him.
Right.
That's his call, right?
But we're not asking Ivan to decide that the guard looked at him funny. We
Correct.
supply the guard looking at him funny.
Right. Right. That's exactly right. Have
Then
you
he
seen? I've got
interprets why.
right. Exactly, and this is amazing. My brother had told me when I was back in the Springs taking care of my mother-in-law and my wife. I had lunch with my brother, and he told me he'd seen maybe the one of his greatest television shows in his life. And he's 67. My brother's a film aficionado. He wanted to get his Master of Fine Arts and be a film critic. So my brother and I share film as a passion. But when he says something, I listen about film. And he said, "Have you seen Ripley on Netflix? Have you seen Ripley?" And I said no. He said, well, first of all, it's black and white, which instantly for me is I love black and white. Black and white for me is the perfect way to express without again, you talk about dialing people's focus in. When we have colors, people tend to get sidetracked by color. They get sidetracked by the maison scene and not so much by what we're being said. So I said, okay, that wins me over. And of course, Ripley's based on the books or a book, one of the 6 books that she's written. And I had never read the books. I've ordered the books. I'm going to actually read the books now. The show was so amazing. I want to read the books. But there were moments in that film, I'm watching with my wife, or the TV show, that I said to my wife, this was masterful. And then see if you feel the same way. When he first meets Freddie, and Freddie walks up and Freddie's mannerisms, and he sits down and Freddie looks at him. And from his POV, we get the facial expression, the look on his face, and Jenny's like, "Oh, she already suspects him." I said, "No. Our character is paranoid through guilt that this person sees who he is. That's his POV." And it was so subtle and so masterful. And my wife's like, "Man, she already suspects this guy." I said, "No. We're seeing this. This is from his POV.
Yeah.
He thinks that he's onto it because he is a con man. He's got guilty conscience. He knows what he's doing, and he suspects. And I said, pay attention. Is that he did it in the bank? He did it with this meeting Freddie. He did it when he met Freddie's girlfriend. Everybody looked at him with the same suspicious look. And I said, this was from his POV. So we know he's carrying this. So we don't need the internal dialogue of him saying, "Does this guy suspect me?" We get it through and I thought, to be a director capable of imparting to the actors, you have to give us this almost obvious, you suspect him immediately interpretation, because we're shooting it from his point of view. And I remember thinking, this is masterful television. My God, this is TV, man. It's masterful. And it changed how we watched the remainder, because the first couple of times I missed it. And by the 3rd episode, I'm like, oh, now I'm watching everything from his POV. But normally when we watch film, we just take it all in and we just take it all for granted. Oh, she suspects him. Well, she
We
might.
trust it. We trust it.
Right.
But the unreliable narrator.
Right. Yeah. And we know it's from Ridley's, everything's coming from Ridley's. Like Remains of the Day, the book, the internal dialogue in Remains of the Day is phenomenal. How can you make a film, Remains of the Day, without a voiceover? And they did it. They pulled it off. I mean, Anthony Hopkins was a master actor, and they pulled it off by how they set the scene, how they blocked the characters, how they shared dialogue, told us what Hopkins' internal dialogue was. But when they first said they were going to make Remains of the Day a film, I thought, you can't. It's going to be nothing but voiceover from Hopkins.
Blade Runner dialed up to 11. Yeah.
Correct. Which I again, I hate to say it. I don't know how you feel about this. I hated the voiceover in Blade Runner. Right?
I only hate it because Ford hated it, and I can't hear it without him sounding irritated.
I hated it because it was like, well, we already kind of, these are, in a way, we should get this, again, show don't tell. We should get this through the scenes that Ridley Scott is providing us.
For it to be noir, I would like it to have a voiceover. Not that they all did, but the ones where you have that detective.
Oh, Mickey Spillane, the Mickey Spillane, Mike Hammer, yeah.
This is why I think people want it in there, and the few details that aren't obvious, like
right. Well, my
what is
issue,
a Blade Runner and stuff like that.
I didn't hate the concept of using voiceover. I
Just
don't want
that.
him to tell us the obvious, right? When we meet the captain, and the captain is this bigoted, racist, and he says he's the kind of guy that would call a black man out. You know what I mean? Dude, we can see that. We don't need you telling us what we can see. So it's not the voiceover I have the problem with. It's what he's telling us that we're already witnessing. You don't have to tell me she's a hot fox. I can see it for myself. Oh, this dame was a hot fox. Dude,
Yeah,
I can
but
see
she was
that. Tell me
too.
what I don't know about her. It's the kind of woman that might have been married to a banker solely for his bankroll. Oh, that's interesting. That's
Yeah.
character. But don't tell me she's a hot fox. I'm seeing this for myself, right? So the voiceover is cool. It's what you're telling me in the voiceover that's extraneous or insults my intelligence,
Right.
right? Rule number
Or
one in
irritates
film,
the
and
actor.
yes, or irritates the actor, correct. But the one thing I don't want is for you to insult my intelligence, right? And that's what happens when you tell me that I'm what coming out of the bigoted captain's mouth tells me he's the kind of guy that would call a dame a whore or whatever, or call a woman a dame or. But if we don't know, there's my captain, and we get a shot of the captain sitting in his office. He's the kind of guy that calls a woman a dame. Okay, because we haven't heard him
Haven't
speak
met
to
him yet.
us. Yeah,
Yeah.
haven't met him yet. Right.
Yeah.
So
So
anyway, we're way
that's the
off
thing.
topic. But
Well,
this
no, we're not.
this
We're still on topic.
okay. Okay. Okay.
With the Of Man franchise, right? We have a commitment to allowing a lot of discovery,
Right.
right? As the presenter, I get to discover. I get to let go of a variety of things, and as the player, I get to assert a broader sense of my character than maybe I've experienced before. Maybe not, but maybe my ability to, like, as the game encourages me to don't ask what this is, to right to act as if you know who's there and
Yep.
what these things are about, right? To ground yourself in that scene, in that moment. This gets harder with the space game because fantasy tends to be fantasy,
Correct. Correct.
and
100%.
science fiction could be Blade Runner, it could be Star Trek, it could be Star Wars. With space
Yeah.
wizards, it's a
100%.
harder ask.
It is. Yeah.
So how I present the information doesn't matter which side of the relationship I'm on, but
Mhm.
how I demonstrate my understanding of what you communicated to me and what the setting is becomes the thing that needs some explanation, that needs some
Yeah.
examples, and that
Uh,
can
uh,
be
uh,
benefited by explaining a philosophy of it.
yeah. Exactly. And as I told Dell, because I've been completely honest about this. Science fiction is not my forte. I don't read science fiction novels. I don't read science fiction I mean, I love science fiction, film, television. So I have a great appreciation for it, but I am not an aficionado, so to speak, of it. Obviously, I can appreciate different genres from the space opera science fiction of Star Wars to the 2001 Space Odyssey quality of science fiction. So those things aren't lost on me, and that's all I need to understand to build the setting and the world that we're going to put your character in that space. So that's not a problem. When we're talking about how much of that data influences character, right? Because you're talking about when I read Traveler, for instance, I'm already, as I look at the character generation, for instance, versus say D&D, where you just randomly roll up 6 generic attributes, or not generic, I should say general attributes. They're general, you know, strength, speed, smarts, whatever. And that's it. And then of course they're gonna have probably a name, and they're gonna be a gender, and they're gonna maybe, uh, you have some vision of some of your favorite fantasy character or something that you're kind of basing them on. You read Traveler, and there is a distinct pattern of the kind of fiction we're dealing with, the kind of level of technology in which you've gone through a career. These are career-based people. They're not going to hit the ground as a 13-year-old kid inheriting his father's sword. There is this epicness and just character creation that so
Yeah.
informs the players
You can
of what
really
they're
feel
getting
like
into.
Forever War, like Haldeman's
Yeah,
Forever War in it. And
it's amazing. Just like 2D20 Star Trek, the character gen really should get us all in the same headspace of what Star Trek. Hopefully, you're bringing Star Trek to it, from your experiences watching the show, reading the novels, etc. But you do get a sense that you're building a character that fits already in this window of prescribed space. Now, what kind of character exists in that space? Who is my doctor? What is my doctor about? My engineer, my officer, my science officer, are they half Vulcan? Are they Vulcan? Are they android? Are they right? So, but this space is helped defined by the IP that exists that people hopefully are already fans of. That's why they want to be a character in this IP. So, Dark Age of Man, well, we do a pseudo historical period. We kind of set that fiction for you. This is roughly 850 to 1066. That's a pretty broad 200 years, but it's still fantasy, and that you can flip through it, and we'll tell you it is, but we'll also flip through and show you monsters that obviously don't exist. Well, I don't think they exist in the real world, but there are people who might say, sure, these things exist, right? But so we set a setting and boundaries that at least help empower the player to understand the space. And you are 100% right. The challenge for me in science fiction is the level for them to move functionally through the space, a space we take for granted, right? If I said to you, we're going to play Top Secret, it's 2024, and you're in Chicago, Illinois. Well, if you may not live in Chicago, but you could do some work, you can look it up. But everybody knows what exists in 2024, whether cell phones or satellites. We all bring to the table this broad understanding, unless you're a complete imbecile. But most people I play with aren't. They're well read, they're well educated, they're smart people. They are completely comfortable with 2024. They live in it. They live in it. There is no question, right? They might not know what's going on in biology to answer biological questions of a science biology question, etc. Right? They might have to have some fictional poetic license with how their biologist maybe answers a DNA question, but we're all okay with, right? It's not exact, but it's close enough for this puzzle. But again, when sci-fi, what are the reaches in which their characters position? Which means when they're in character space to answer, or if I'm going to be a naive narrator in a science fiction, I better have an idea of it, but they better really have an idea of the space if they're going to create. If they're going to take some authorship. So, and it begs me to say, as I've said to Dell, we may be looking at Space Age of Man not having a naive narrator seat, but I don't know. I honestly don't know. Um,
you'll have
it
to
is, it
discover.
is, yeah,
Yeah.
this last few weeks, as we started the process of really playtesting it and getting serious about the next book, it's given me pause, which is good. It's a good thing. We're in no hurry, and I want to do it right, but it has given me pause to reflect, what we need to empower the GM to do his job. We need to also make sure players are having the experience that we intend them to have. And maybe I overthink it, but I don't think so. I don't think so. And not
One thing
everybody
I've
even
noticed.
cares. I mean, I think a
No,
lot of people play and they don't get frustrated. It's just having a good time. It's shits and giggles with their friends. But
but
we live in a different planet,
yeah,
we discuss this stuff. We care about the hobby. We care about the experience. We want people to have certain experiences. We get so passionate that we fight. We argue in the community. That's fine. That's also passion, right? As we
yeah.
attempt to understand these things. And I'm not certain the answers for Space Age of Man, but it's been a good crossroads for me as I'm reflecting differently about game design than I ever have. Because when I make a football game, for instance, it's all about, well, how mechanically do I want to impart the sport of football, and how accurately do I want to impart? The intent is 100% right. Now, do I want it to have cards, dice? Do I want it to be quick? Do I want it to take a long time to resolve a play or whatever? That's a given. And Dark Age of
You're
Man,
choosing
I knew what I was
from
trying.
options
Yeah,
you understand. Yeah, but now
correct.
you're you're exploring, and that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I'm
That
in the
one
and
that
I'm
the
in
second
this. I'm
game
in
is different from the first is awesome.
right, and I'm in the very uncomfortable. I'm sure this is how astrophysicists feel. What is dark matter? I'm in the dark matter space of Space Age of Man. What the hell is
Sure,
this?
it's kind of interesting. Like for me, when I think about science fiction games,
Hmm.
like, from Cyberpunk to, Ringworld or whatever.
Yeah.
There are some questions. How do we help the people who buy this game get a good grip on what the technology can actually do?
Hmm.
And so, like, you have something like Traveler with its tech levels, or something like GURPS explaining tech levels and
Right.
saying, so use these tools to decide the social or societal or technological level of whatever. So that's an approach. That's a solution.
Yeah.
If you approach it from a list of gear, that will never be solved, right?
No.
Unless there's some context given for that gear. Like I've played some games where, like like a Star Wars, for example,
Hmm.
you have the film. People watch the films and they get a sense, they get the context of the technology from the film, and then
Right.
they get a listing of something they saw in the film, and they,
Right.
they feel a certain level of comfort. It can do this much damage, or it has this life,
Right.
this battery life, or what have you.
Yeah.
But either way, you end up with these long lists of gear. A game that I
Yes.
really, or approach I really liked, is to say, for setting important reasons, the technology of today,
Mhm.
like all the things that you can do as a consumer today, all the things you can buy as a consumer today, is exactly what you can buy in our future world.
There you go. Yeah.
The model names are different, and here are the brands, and here are the logos of all
Yeah.
these companies. But you're going to have a personal communication device that gives you access to information and
Yep.
public contacting for some kind of
Communication and yep.
fee.
Hmm.
And so nobody has to feel uncomfortable with
Right.
imagining what the technology can do.
Right. Right. There it is.
Some
Yeah.
particular interests or hobbyists will say, well, I don't understand why the technology hasn't become this, that, or the other thing. And you say, well, setting reason, blah.
Right. There you
And if
go.
they don't
Right.
like it, then, well, it's the wrong gamer setting or whatever. So I kind of
Sure.
liked that approach.
Oh
And
yeah, and that answers that's a great that right there is a wonderful lead for us, right? You've just given me a good idea to how we might evaluate how gear would work in the game. I think this is true even of skills, right?
sure,
Every skill that exists in today could exist, but maybe on a right. These are questions literally Dell and I have been debating. So, those are great ideas. And see, we haven't looked at it from that point of view. I've been looking at it. We got to list a bunch of skills, and it's like I don't really want to do that. I want to leave the players with a kind of a broader idea of how they can solve their problems with basic general um, what do you know cat
procedures or categories,
well
classes, occupations,
no no disciplines.
bagels, disciplines.
Bagels, and that's it, bagels. Disciplines, right? So science or medicine or
Sure, yeah.
security, just disciplines. Similar
Yeah,
to 2D20 in the sense that they're more like
that's a nice
categories,
solution, right? Yeah,
right? Because I don't want to create a whole buttload of skills and then have to write examples of how those skills, what they are and how they work in game, etc. So there's things here too that are again, we can take them for granted if we're not careful. And then we got a problem because, as I said, Dell said what's great about Dark Age of Man is it's pregnant with opportunity. And I said, yes, but it's also pregnant with fiasco, right? Especially in science fiction. We can create some serious fiasco, really problems when somebody's thinking, oh, I've got a communicator on my lapel like in Star Trek. And everybody else is like, well, dude, we don't even have these are transistor radios, they're right. So we have to have some grip on that. And I mean, this is a kind of a no-brainer, but at the same time, how does that impact players' ability to be in character or in character as author? And that's what we're getting at. It's not just information, it's how is it going to inform the player so they are comfortable with the space that they're authoring in, right? Yeah. And that's it. That's the dilemma. For me, recently, it's just been I've been looking for in character as character experiences, and I'm getting in character as author or in character as player. And
sure.
that's a
Not
fact, and
satisfying,
there's nothing wrong with that. It's just I would like to know why I'm frustrated with it.
right?
And in character as player is pretty much happens all the time. That's okay. I've been doing it. I can deal with that. But in character as character, and I'm getting in character as author opportunities. I'm a little, it's something that was new to me. And I hadn't even thought about in character as author, which was a
Sure,
big wake up call. So before we even had this conversation, you had helped cure one of my frustrations. I didn't even know what the hell I was dealing with.
sure.
Right.
Well, cool. I'm glad to help.
Yeah,
But
of course,
for the,
always.
I guess for our last thought, the communication aspect, like if we're shooting for an as character situation
Mhm.
and I've put you in an unfamiliar environment, so you're relying on me to give you the details about the environment. Like how do we handle decompression
Right.
on a spaceship, right? Do they have what kind of spacesuits do they have? Big bulbous, but like,
Right.
right? Are you relying on me to invent that technology? So there's a whole bunch of
Right.
stuff there.
Hmm.
But there are some modern approaches where someone would say, okay, as the air is pouring out of the hole in the wall,
Hmm.
right? Your spacesuit locker is sliding across the floor, right? And so oh, I'm going to grab it. Okay, you need to roll. So they roll, and
Uh-huh.
everyone's all involved. And then they opens the lid to get the spacesuit, and then the game master says, "Okay, your spacesuit's inside. Tell me what that looks like."
Right. Yeah, it's a real problem. It's a
For the
huge
person
problem.
who's already imagined that scene,
Hmm.
who's been imagining the spacesuit in the locker the whole time,
Hmm.
they're not creating anything now. It's not a big ask now.
That's right. That's right.
But the tell me what it looks like might be disruptive,
Yep. Yeah.
or it might not.
Yeah. That's it.
And then,
And I
right?
and that was part of my techniques for the naive narrator presenter seat was putting that on the player. You're going to do the heavy lifting. Tell me what this looks like. And I just took for granted it was providing a space that they would flourish in, a space that they had agency in, a space for them to share their imagination, which
And
is
I think for
true
a lot
for
of people
certain
it is.
players. For
Yeah.
certain players, correct.
But there's people on the extremes.
Right.
I don't know how many people that is, but I feel like the groups that have down from the dawn of time we came from from the people that have coalesced around me tend toward
Right.
that part of the spectrum.
Right.
So I'm sure there's a social aspect there of
Right.
like drawing to like, right? I'm not choosing to play with the person who is very opposed to an
Right.
as character or even as author environment, right?
Right.
But there may be a lot of us out there who just accept or are unaware of how a shift in language can lead to a shift in experience.
Yes. Yeah. It is. It is. Well, I've said it a long time ago, and I believe it's true. First and foremost, how we communicate is the beginning of all of it. And something as simple as my reflection on how they communicated Ripley's own guilt and paranoia was from his POV when they looked at him and they sized him up, right? Was that the actual character, or was that Ripley's interpretation of those human beings sitting in front of him? Well, we know it was because it was his POV. Film has rules, and when it's from your POV or from the POV, those are the rules, and those rules he did not break them. In Ripley, every time it was from Ripley's POV, he never broke the rules. It was brilliant. It was masterful. And this is communication. How they communicate. How did Lucas communicate time? A screen swipe. We all instinctively understood this meant meanwhile. It's the rules of film.
Later, yeah,
Yeah, later, exactly.
yeah,
And he didn't have to put up a thing saying meanwhile, right? The
yeah.
screen swipe was a beautiful and innovative way to for us all to go, oh, we're moving on to another scene, another place, beautiful, right? And it's
And if they had told
iconic
us how
now.
long that duration was, we
Did
would have
Nope.
lost the momentum.
Yep. Yep. And it didn't matter because this is, again, it fit with the genre of high adventure, swashbuckling space fantasy,
Yeah.
right? None of those details matter. This is sometime, somewhere, roughly the same, maybe even the same moments, right? But it
So
meant
is
we
that
were
another
leaving
question
Luke
for
and
Space
going
Age?
to, I'm sorry?
Is that another question that Space Age has to answer about the the idiom, the
That's a great question. That's a wonderful question because in Dark Age of Man, we leave it to the whole table to kind of micro macro. We talk about micro moments, macro moments. I might, if they're going to travel north, I might zoom out into macro and just give a brief description of their safe travels to the north, or I might macro in and interrupt them, which we do all the time in say D&D sandbox open world play, right? We can shuttle them on through the 35 miles of the hex with a quick description of dawn to dusk with no encounters and you set camp, right? And or we can micro in on as you're traveling midday, sun's high in the sky among the trees, your eye catches a wagon wheel just off the old path, and we now know we're macro. We're in it right here. So Dark Age of Man does some of that to some degree, but yes, these are things to think about.
Yeah.
How will we do those things? How will we?
Like, are we talking Star Trek, the original series? Are we talking
Right.
about Space 1999? Are we
Yeah.
talking about,
Yeah. Right.
are we talking about Buck Rogers? Is everyone wearing spandex?
Exactly.
I need to know how much spandex is.
Right.
This,
Exactly. Yeah. Are they wearing mullets in the future or not wearing mullets in the future?
right. How many times has the mullet come back for revenge?
Yeah. Is that
Chrome, no
spacesuit
chrome.
got bell bottoms? Really?
Yeah.
But it's
And heels.
1999 and they're wearing 1970s bell bottom jumpsuits, right? Does
So there's
fashion matter? Right?
this is another question, right?
It
The
is.
the
Yeah.
more we talk about details, the more someone in the room is retconning what they've already imagined, because
Bingo.
imagination is at
Yes, it's
the speed of thought.
subconscious. It's actually
Yeah.
subconscious, and which our subconscious is a million times faster than our consciousness. Which is why the minute I open my mouth as a GM, I've already a million times
You're
behind
late.
everybody else.
Yeah.
Literally,
Yeah.
because the minute I open my mouth, they have already subconsciously. This can
Many
be
of
this
them.
can be
Yeah.
understood as just coming to the table with expectations of what they think Ravenloft is, because they've been playing
Right.
in Ravenloft in the 70s with all their buddies. Now they come to the table in 2025 with me in Ravenloft, and they've already got expectations. That's what expectations are, subconscious
Yeah.
thoughts, right? That they aren't even aware of. Expectations. This is going to be a horror movie because this director has made all my favorite horror movies. Woody Allen, this guy's a crack up, ha ha ha. Then he does Crimes and Misdemeanors, and you're like, holy shit, that's amazing. I loved it, but Woody Allen fans went, this ain't funny. This was not funny. If Match Point, if you've ever seen Woody Allen's Match Point, his dramas are masterpieces. He's supposed to be a goofy, anxiety-ridden comic, but his dramas are phenomenal. And he's come away going, okay, if you go into every Woody Allen movie expecting bananas, but you get Match Point or you get Crimes and Misdemeanors, you're going to come away from that going, well, that just there. Where were the goofball laughs of bananas, right?
Right. Lots of
So
directors, I think, end up in
yeah,
that case. So
right.
so it teaches
Um,
us something about what to say as the game master and
yeah,
as the player. It's like what is essential. You'll play with people who have to tell you what they're wearing and what
yep,
the wind does to their coat and all of these
yeah,
things,
yeah,
which is incredibly disruptive for some of the people and incredibly helpful for other
hmm
people.
hmm
And until we
yeah,
know those people,
yeah.
there's
Well,
a
and
certain process to
yeah,
go through. Yeah.
and to even note about yourself, I'd only been on YouTube playing briefly. I've been GMing again for years and years and years. And I happened to come across I think it was God Emperor 2's old YouTube channel one day, and he was running some fantasy game. And Philip, I can't remember his last name, but he used to be in the community, and I watched them introduce their characters. And I've told this story before. I told it to Del just recently, and he introduced the setting. He introduced the setup, what was coming, and what they were about to do, go on a hunt, a boar hunt or something. And he went to every player and said, "Tell me, introduce your character." And the way Philip described his character gave me goosebumps and still does to this day, just remembering how he described his character. And I remember thinking, I want to be at that table where people keep me immersed in this
Yeah.
thing. And again, he could have just said, yeah, I'm blonde, I'm wearing furs, which is what I hate to say it, most tables do, right? It's a pretty, you know, but he took the minute to describe the thing not as a matter of fact, oh, my name is Rorik and I'm a barbarian and blah blah blah. No, to describe everything about his countenance, how he stood up. He was washing the blood from his hands in the river. Why? Don't know, don't care. All I know is it told me this motherfucker's just why has he got blood on his hands? And he stands up and he describes it. I'm like, this is for me. That's going to get me in character it's going to help immerse me.
Right.
Not everybody at the table did that, but that was a remarkable moment for me as a viewer of, again, I don't watch a lot of actual plays. I try to watch them when I'm trying to learn a game, or I try to watch when I'm trying to learn, techniques. I watch a lot of your stuff because I'm also saying, how does Anthony handle these descriptions? So, I use them for learning tools, not entertainment. But there are those moments where you are truly moved or entertained. And that description of that character, I remember thinking, okay, I would like to be capable of that as a player, and I'd like to be at tables where people don't take those things for granted. They
He
don't.
sounds like he conveyed the character's essence rather than a
Yes.
character description, right?
Yeah. Bingo. Right. Yeah. And it was very cinematic, which again, I've talked about it before. I can't help but want to be cinematic as a GM, and I can't help but want to be cinematic as a player. But to do that means I have to sometimes step outside my character to describe the maison scene, which is potentially going to step on toes, is going to create a problem for other players or for the GM if I take that liberty, right? So
Somewhere from
these
a
are things
problem
that
to
we
an
aren't aware
opportunity.
of. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And it is, as I started this whole conversation when you first asked me, the GM seat is so completely different for me from the player seat. And I think it's probably is for everybody, but I don't know. But so therefore, it is not easy for me. How I want to GM and facilitate an actual game table for people it's a different kind of job for me, and I do it a different way for a particular reason. Some of it's habitual, some of it's intentional, because I'm about facilitating the game first, and that's making it as easy for everybody to play, right? But as a player, boy, I'm looking for a certain headspace. And
Sure.
it's big that everybody there supports that headspace as best they can. I mean, they can't I'm not, again, this also comes down to who's responsible for your experiences, you or other
Satisfaction. Yeah.
people. Well, I'm responsible ultimately. I'm accountable and responsible mostly for what I get from a session. But it helps, when we're all in the same, when everybody's at that same space, right?
Yeah.
Or even level of understanding the rules. We all know when a new guy's joining the group's never played Star Trek, we all go, oh, it's going to be some learning curve. We're going to have to walk guys through Star Trek to get them up to speed, right? We all know
Sure.
that
Now we're
experience.
playing the learning game,
Yes. Yeah.
and that's our investment of time in the better
Yep.
game down the road.
Yes.
And
Bingo.
if you're
That's it.
if you're not willing to do that, well,
Well, you're not gonna be playing long, and you're not gonna have any players if you're not willing to facilitate the game, right? Teach the game.
but
But when you have a group, let's say, been together for four of you have been together, or a GM, 5 players for years, and that new guy walks in that we all want to play with but doesn't know, we're gonna have to change the method of our madness until they kind of get up to speed, right?
yeah.
But yes, but yes, you have to be able to do that, or you're not going to have new players. You're
But I
not
hear
going to
you.
play with new friends, right?
I hear you on the game master experience is different from the player experience, and I find that's true in most games. Like, for example, when I'm running Star Wars, I, of course, still get to portray non-player characters.
Yeah.
And I have the fun of trying to convey the feeling of destiny if we're playing those kinds of characters, like
Right.
in a force involved game,
Right.
or obligation, hunger, desperation in an
Yeah.
Edge of the Empire kind of game, or that sense
Right.
of duty, right? The drumbeat in your mind for
Yeah.
Age of Realm. I have some fun playing with the themes of it as
Yeah.
the thing I can
Yeah,
engage
it's
with.
great.
For this Call of Cthulhu campaign, I'm allowing myself to the way that I've done the preparation is to use a real world city, Boston, a place where I've been, a place I have a clear map of, and I gave myself the freedom to let that Boston be fictional.
Yes.
Whereas normally I would want to be using actual 1931
Right.
Boston.
Right.
Not this time.
Right. Okay.
So that all of us.
Can I interrupt there for a second? For you or for the players?
Both of us.
Okay. So allowing it to be more fictionalized is just it's for the whole table.
Yep. So
Yeah.
that that what strikes you as true about your character, a place you might go, a person
Right.
you might know, can just flow from your imagination
Right.
without a "can I know a guy?"
Sue's coffee bar down on the corner, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can all just
Okay.
be invented in the moment, and that will be disruptive for some and not for others. And
Right.
I'm letting myself not care about that.
Good. Okay.
And so I'm getting an awful lot of play as character in the game master's role than would normally be possible because there is no future for the
Right.
game.
Right.
The preparation for the game is after we play, I write down what happened on the calendar. It's an actual calendar
Right.
page, and I just write really small. And then I type it in to the computer, which
Right.
now it's on like 3-point font. It's so small in these little
Right.
date boxes.
Wow.
And there are no themes. There are no right. It's not Star Wars, so I don't have to worry about coincidence. It's cosmic horror, so if they encounter any of the magical, horrific stuff,
Right.
it takes care of itself.
Correct. Yeah.
I don't have to play on any of those layers. I just have to represent the people that they meet,
Yep.
and I just have to spark description of what the room
Yep.
might be like.
Yeah. It
Large room,
sounds a
small
lot like
room.
naive narrator to some degree. It
Sure.
sounds like you're doing a lot of what we try to do with naive narrator, right? Except that you must have some information in front of you that you're hoping to impart, as opposed to me having nothing other than the agreed upon space,
Right.
right?
Many of the many of the names that they would have heard in the first session aren't exactly on a seed list. They were characters that were created.
Right.
And I thought in the first session we might play through maybe 3 days. And
Yeah.
so I imagined what would this character be doing over the next 3 days? And then if it came
Right.
to a dice roll, I rolled the dice
Okay.
to see if how successful they were. And I knew these things
Okay.
and I put them on the calendar. And then
Okay.
we played and we only got through a day.
Yeah. Right.
And that's fine.
Yeah. Right.
And so
The best
then,
laid plans.
that didn't bother me at all.
Exactly. You
That was awesome.
get in the way of the game. Look, the game
Yeah.
is gonna happen, whether you like it or not. All right.
So then, as it went on, right, I in my prep time, I made more characters. It's like,
Okay.
well, there has to be like it's a big newspaper, so there have to be newspaper boys. There have to be, like signs on buses and
Right.
this kind of stuff. And I was learning about the district names of Boston. I was learning some important
Right.
street names in Boston, and just loading my mind with things to
Yeah.
help with improvisation.
Right.
And then as they're getting to know their characters and deciding what they want to do with their characters, I'm processing the NPCs and I'm imagining
Right.
how does the NPC order his coffee?
Right.
If I understand how he
Right.
orders his coffee, then I understand how he treats the little people.
Yeah. Well, it's true. Listen, again, this is what we do as actors when we try to understand, right, who Stanley is in Streetcar Named Desire, right? Is if you want to understand how he's going to speak to his wife and his wife's sister, you need to maybe understand how he addresses his friends and his. Yes, I mean, as an actor, you're not just reading lines, you hopefully are learning the character somehow, or you're preparing the character somehow, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
so that's how I'm approaching, which means that because there's no mystery,
correct.
this person did this bad thing and you're in a position of responsibility to deal with the bad thing, and you need to find this so that you can learn about that, right? There is
Right.
none of that. There
Correct.
a whole bunch of bad things are happening, and some things they're hearing about and some things they're not, and some things they
Right.
care about and some things they don't. But
Exactly.
what they're getting is the experience of being this person in that situation.
Yeah,
And
and
then
that's
looking
Starkey
back,
Man. That's it. Yeah. That was the
they're
goal. The
starting to feel
goal
guilty.
was be a character in this space, and there'll
Period.
be all kinds of things going on. And you also might even have your own motivations. Hey,
I
this
hope.
is something I want to pursue. Right. Well, what ends up happening is they start to experience the world and it starts to set their priorities
Sure.
subconsciously. Right.
Yeah.
So again, the things we don't tell players we're using their own imagination against them, right?
For
It's
them, against them, for them,
well, yeah, yeah,
against them,
right,
for them. Yeah.
right. So yeah, right, yeah, right. Not yeah, you're right. Not really against them, but this is the thing. The teaser, the mystery, the ziggurat on the hill, right? Something that inspires the adventure, inspires the thoughts, inspires the direction.
Yeah.
I don't have to have the answers in Dark Age of Man. I don't have to have any of those answers. They're going to discover them as I am as they pursue those answers. And suddenly we're having these. They're in character, hopefully living in character in space. Again,
Right.
where we then break that dynamism that I'm now seeing more because of this naive narrator seat is asking them to take some authorship and agency that I'm beginning to realize, okay, that's fine, but then what are the limits? And that's something that
What are
kind
the
of,
limits?
as Dell loves to say, people just get it. Nobody wants to fart at the table. They tend to keep things in arm's reach. And I'm like, that's just, I haven't had the luxury of playing, running Dark Age of Man for strangers, but he's had now 2 conventions. I don't know how many sessions. And he's found that people just get it. They don't overstep. They tend to, but that, whether they are going to candidly tell you afterwards, that was a shitty experience, or dude, that was amazing experience. You'll never get that candid, right? I suppose if somebody
Good game.
stands up and right, if somebody stands up and walks away from the table in the middle of a session, you'll go, "Oh, obviously, guy wasn't liking what we're doing here." But you're not always going to get feedback, and you're not always going to
No,
know whether you're right. And I think a lot of my peers would even be surprised to hear in the last year and a half, couple of years, I've been frustrated as a player, right? And they might take it
sure,
personally, which I hope none of them do. It is not their responsibility. It is never this stuff should never be taken personally. It is where I'm at. It's what I'm failing to see or do or understand about myself. And that includes my own game, Dark Age of Man, when I'm in character, but I also recognize for me to impart what I'm trying to achieve with my prestige, I have to position myself in a different headspace to do that. Which means
yeah,
breaking the fourth wall or going out of character or into third person narrative, so to speak, right? And these are things that what ends up happening is you just play and you end up just doing whatever you got to do to play and to do it. But I find myself saying, but boy, I wish this was more disciplined style of play. You know what I mean? But
yeah.
that may
That's the
never
next
occur.
game.
May never occur, right? Yeah. So,
It might,
uh,
but that's the
unbelievable.
next game. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, as you've no doubt noticed, I've been jostled, pushed, climbed on,
Yes.
whined at,
I don't
and
know if you can hear mine whining and scratching at the door, but I think
so
they're wanting some attention. My dogs.
they have a better sense of time than I ever do. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
thanks for the conversation.
Anthony, thank you, my friend, and we need to do this more often. It was
Definitely.
fantastic. We don't let the odd sides of the world keep us apart. I can find a way to fit you in, man, whether it's late or early, right? So
Wicked.
yeah,
Let's do
I
it.
appreciate you. I appreciate everything. Our friendship for my God, since what 29, 2010. It's
Well, that
fantastic.
implies that we're getting older, and I'm not sure that.
Yeah, there's no way around that, my friend. I turned 55 in March, and you know what? I'm just embracing it. I'm gonna take the Ricky Gervais view of things. When I hit 60, it's gonna be fuck off. I can say anything I want, be anything I want. 60 is that magic number where you just don't have to give a shit anymore, right? I'm at 55. Yeah, I still feel compelled to care, right? But I do. Reality is I don't want to be an a-hole. I don't want to go through life, being a miserable person. So, but I
Fingers
I will. I
crossed.
don't think I'll ever stop enjoying or learning the hobby. That's for sure.
It's
Yeah.
huge, and it's growing with us. So,
Oh, it's amazing. It is
thankfully,
amazing.
yeah.
Yes. There was a period where I thought computers will end all tabletop paper, pencil. I will say I still have a hell of a time, and Ivan and I complained about this 10 years ago. Roll 20. It's become more and more popular, Foundry, Roll 20, and it's one of those things, which is a whole nother conversation that sucks me out of immersion,
Sure.
right? I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. Visually, I think it's the
Task
visual
switching.
stimulation. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And not being able to see my the other players' faces to know what they mean. What's the countenance when John says that? What's Dell's countenance when he,
It's more
it's
isolating.
so those subtle cues are so important to being involved in the role play portion with your party mates, Oh well, it is what
Anyway,
it is. All right, brother. Thank you. I
talk to you
appreciate
soon.
it. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.